Hello, namaste, good evening, everybody. This is Soumita Tiwari, and you are watching me here on Nation Talks, the Facts Intact. Once again, I'm here to raise the real issues and the real voices of India. We are going to talk about in this special episodes on various topics which are related to public interest and social interest. Today, we are addressing one of such issues which has been raised a lot during, I think, for about so many years now, and this is about NFU. So this injustice which is there, this is regarding the pending case which is there of NFU, or you call it as non-functional upgradation in the Indian Armed Forces. You all can always search upon it on Google, and you can know more about the NFU angles and what it is all about. And we'll discuss it further also with my special guest. And in this matter, all the officers of the Indian Army, Navy, and Air Force are affected. The Department of Personnel and Training, which is DOPT, and it is directly under the PMO office, which is Prime Minister's office. They issued a letter on 30th of April 2019, forming a high-level committee to actually examine the recommendations of the 7th Pay Central Pay Commission, which is CPC, on this NFU. But what happened surprisingly that this committee, which had no representatives at all from the armed forces or not from the Central Armed Police Forces, which is CAPFs. So this was really disgusting because this was a committee which was formed for the NFU, and it did not have any armed forces personnel or anybody from CAPFs. So we all think that this is something which was really needed, and it did not happen. So, as presently also, this case for granting NFU to the armed forces is in the Supreme Court. And while it has already been directed the government to implement the same for the CAPFs, it is already being done for the CAPFs. Now, this kind of a thing which has happened, so the anger across the spectrum was evident because the committee had those who have already been granted it and ignored those for whom it was actually most essential. The committee has been asked to examine various aspects of the recommendations of the 7 CPC on NFU. The general sentiment amongst the armed forces is that this committee has actually been formed to find out ways and means and to find some excuses and to delay the allocation. That is what we all are thinking like. So with the case still going on in the Honorable Supreme Court, this is still going on, and armed forces can do little, but we can wait and watch. But we, as citizens of India who love our armed forces, who love our soldiers, and we are really, really very grateful to them for their services to the nation and to the Indian Army also. So their services to the nation can raise what we can do as citizens of India, can raise our voices to the higher ups and settle this out from our and whatever support we can do to join me on this particular entire topic of NFU. I have with me Mr. Nehal Agrawal. So please welcome Mr. Nehal on this platform. Thank you, Nehal. Nehal comes from armed forces background, and he is a trained commercial pilot, and he's been trained for this. Also, he's son of Colonel Mukul Dev, who happens to be the real voice of India. Of course, he's supporting and raising issues which are in benefit of armed forces serving officers and also for retired officers, the entire community of armed forces. So we are so thankful to Colonel Mukul Dev, also to Nehal, to take this up with me on this platform. Welcome, Nehal, and we all would love to hear more from you on NFU. What do you think? What's going on? What exactly, in your opinion, is it going in the right direction, firstly? And what do you think? What's your take on NFU, if I have to start with and begin with that?
First of all, thank you, ma'am, for giving me this welcome and for providing me this platform to talk about NFU, which is a very major topic right now for the armed forces. You see, yeah. NFU was introduced back in 2006 by the 6th Pay Commission. Yeah. And NFU was basically to cater for the stagnation in any service. Stagnation as per the appointment or as per the rank. And you see, it was to cater for if a person is
Hmm.
aspiration is aspires to pick up the next rank or go to the next level, but due to the lack of vacancy, he's not
Hmm.
able to do that. So to motivate that person, the
Yeah.
non-functional financial upgradation is given. It is non-functional. That is, my rank or my appointment will remain the same. However, I'll be given a financial upgradation.
Okay.
That was the main idea of NFU. And although armed forces was not specifically excluded,
Hmm.
but they were not granted the this NFU back in
Yeah.
2006. Then in 2000, sorry, by the recommendations of 7 CPC,
Yeah.
the 7 CPC recommended that NFU should be given to armed forces also. Either it should be given or it should be abolished for
Yeah.
everyone.
Hmm.
But that was not done, and the case is
Yeah.
now in the court. There was a case filed in the Armed Forces Tribunal,
Hmm.
and we got a favorable judgment from there. But the
Okay.
government moved to the Honorable Supreme Court, and the case is still pending there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, what do you think? Like, you've been watching this entire case along with your father, like very closely. You have been analyzing it, how it's going on. Like, if you talk about the status of the case in SC, current status of the case, if I talk about, and the possible reasons for delay in making a decision, what do you think are the reasons why there is so much delay in giving out the decision from SC on this matter?
Ma'am, the arguments were concluded last year in this Honorable
Yeah.
Supreme Court. Last year
Okay.
in March, the arguments were concluded for the NFU case,
Hmm.
and the judgment was reserved. However, the the arguments were concluded on 12th of March 2019.
Hmm.
However, the government councils, they brought up a technicality as appellants. They were the ones who moved to the Supreme Court, so they were supposed to serve copies to all the respondents. But
Okay.
after the judgment was reserved by the Honorable Supreme Court, they brought up a technicality that the copies have not been served as of now, and that's why the judgment was held up. And afterwards,
Okay.
also, they were not the ones who served those copies. The respondents had to run here and there to get the copies served to all the other respondents.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
that's why the case was held up, and
Hmm.
subsequently, the government has been time and again asking for dates and more time to clear out all the technicalities so that the judgment can be given. That's why mainly the case is being delayed.
Okay, okay, okay. So when we talk about the delay in the case, that is the reasons which you have clarified. Those are okay, fair enough. But when we talk about the rift which has been created over a period of years between bureaucracy of bureaucrats, you can say like IAS officers and all those people, and then you talk about the armed forces, which is responsible for this. Do you really think that there is a rift which has been created? You think that's the reason?
Definitely, ma'am, there is certainly a rift between the
And why there is this
bureaucracy.
discrimination? I mean, we also would like to talk about the discrimination part over here. Like, what do you think?
Certainly, there's a rift between the bureaucracy and the armed forces, especially the bureaucracy of Ministry of Defense. So there's
Yeah.
a major drift between them and the armed forces.
Hmm.
Uh, for example, the AFHQ cadre services, they were there to support
Hmm.
the armed forces, but
Yeah.
now they claim themselves to be superior to the armed forces, which is not correct. They were there to
Hmm.
support the armed forces in the MOD,
Correct.
the administration and everything. But
Yeah.
now they've started claiming that they're senior to the armed forces,
Hmm.
and obviously that will cause a rift. They claim to be superior to the armed forces, so that will definitely cause a rift between the two,
Hmm.
and that is not healthy.
Huh. Right. And also there is this, I'm just adding one more thing over here because it's about the group A and group B and all that. We all know it, and we need to really address that also in coming times. And that is something which is also of major importance. Anyway, so coming to, what do you think? Like, how much is in this entire case of NFU, if we talk about, how much do you think is Ministry of Defense, or if you talk about the government? central government? What do you think is like are they really responsible for this, or are they? This is just a procedural delays which are taking place, or there can be a big role of MOD. They can intervene and they can take it up. How this entire case can be speed up, speed the speed which is
Certainly,
how it
I
can be.
feel personally that the MOD or the government is
Hmm.
responsible for the delay in this case.
Yeah.
You see, from the beginning, the NFU was for organized Group A services. Okay,
Yes.
and armed forces were not given the status of organized Group A services.
Hmm.
The reason which the government stated that they will not grant NFU to armed forces was that the scheme was particularly for organized group A services, and since armed forces are not one of them, will not be
Hmm.
granting them NFU. However,
Hmm.
in the Armed Forces Tribunal, we proved that armed forces are organized group A services. We proved that, and we got a favorable judgment from the Armed Forces Tribunal. So definitely the MOD, if they want, they can help resolve this issue. But I don't know, maybe as we spoke about the rift between bureaucracy and the armed forces, so might be that that is the thing coming in between, and they are purposefully delaying the case in the Supreme Court.
Yes, yes. Even we are also coming to this conclusion, looking at the entire, scenario of dealing with the case specifically for the armed forces. So this is something which is disgusting, and of course, when we talk about, there is also this discrimination when you see and look at the thing, like somewhere we can say that why there are different standards for CAPF and armed forces. If you look at it closely, you will see that there is this difference which is there for CAPFs and also for the armed forces. Why is
Yes,
this
ma'am.
so? What do you think? Yeah.
Ma'am, that is there. I'll again come back to the NFU point to explain this
Yeah.
discrimination. See,
Sure.
there are two kind of structure. The IAS, IPS, they're all getting NFU. Armed forces
Yeah.
are not getting it. The IAS and IPS have a cylindrical structure. Okay,
Hmm.
so it is like in a state, due to the cylindrical structure, there are at times five joint secretaries, and at times there's only one joint secretary. But in armed forces, it is not like that. Armed forces has a very steep pyramidal structure. Almost
Hmm.
88% of the total officers they retire as lieutenant colonels. They are not able to achieve higher ranks. Okay,
Correct.
so
Hmm.
the NFU scheme was there to cater for this stagnation. Okay, so I think it is most needed by the armed forces because of the steep pyramidal structure. So there is more stagnation in the armed forces. And if we see when Sri Rajnath Singh was the
Hmm.
Minister of Home Affairs,
Yeah.
he was in the Home Ministry. So
Hmm.
uh, the CAPFs were well catered for.
Hmm.
Okay, he resolved a number of issues for the CAPFs. But now, when he has come over to Defense Ministry, all these issues, not only NFU, there are many other issues. Nothing is being resolved. So we are unable to understand why is this discrimination. I mean, aren't the armed forces responsible? Aren't they the last bastion of the country? They are
Yes.
responsible for the protection. So why a
Yes.
discriminatory behavior with them?
Yes. And this issue should be raised to the highest level, I think, because this is something should not be accepted at all. So that's the main thing, and we'll take some questions which are coming on the WhatsApp. It says that the armed forces service, which is much more risky and engaging than the so-called Group A services and CAPFs, is it not something very evident to every decision maker? Yeah. So that's what we were also talking about, that don't you really think that why is this so? I mean, everyone is able to understand that that job is so risky. The people who are the soldier who are fighting on the borders, saving many lives, and we are able to sleep because of them. So why there is this discrimination? So is it something like they are trying to uh, it's an effort to weaken the armed forces so that they can be kept aside, and police people and all these other forces can be given more importance?
Ma'am, weakening the armed forces would be detrimental to the country, to the
Yeah.
national security of the country. Certainly, the armed forces and the CAPFs, they have different roles, and the armed forces have a much riskier job. I think it is
Yes.
mainly because of bureaucracy. They are responsible for this discrimination. It is mainly because of that. They always want to be, they want to remain superior to the armed forces in some way or the other. Okay, so armed forces, we have proved in the court that we are also organized Group A services. Now, what's the
Yes.
matter? Why is there constant dilly dallying of the case? So every decision which is taken for the betterment of the armed forces, or let's say towards the degradation of armed forces, which we have been seeing for the past many years, armed forces have been
Yes.
degraded a lot.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes.
this has to be taken into account.
Yeah.
Also, the armed forces veterans, they have even written to the president of India regarding all these issues of degradation, regarding NFU, regarding other issues, but nothing has
Okay.
been done till now. So I think mainly the
Yes.
bureaucracy is responsible for this. They have written it
Yes.
number of times. It is not if they have written once or twice. They have written a number of times to different people, to the president of India, to the prime minister, to the defense minister, but nothing happens.
Why are they keeping quiet? Is there any political angle to it, or what do you think? Like with your experience, you've been going for the hearings also in Supreme Court. You've been watching this entire case of NFU. What do you think? What is the reason? Because see, whether it's India China or it's India Pakistan or it's any border issues, whenever it's been raised, so that's Indian Army, Indian Air Force, and all three of the forces, they all work together, and then even the entire nation knows about it. So why there is no they are not giving any ear to our voices if they have been raised legally also many times?
Ma'am,
Would you like? Yeah.
I think that the bureaucracy is, it has
Yeah,
come
because
to a
see,
state
yeah, carry on.
where the bureaucracy is commanding the political leadership. I think it is coming to that state now. So if the bureaucracy itself is not interested, or
Hmm.
they are responsible for the degradation, so obviously the political leadership will keep quiet on these issues. And if it has come to the point where bureaucracy is commanding the political leadership, so
Yeah.
I think that is the main reason why these politicians or everybody else is keeping quiet on these
Hmm.
issues.
But don't you think that in the long run, these kind of decisions, which are for serving officers or retired officers, and especially if we talk about NFU, it's going to demoralize the sentiments of armed forces people? What do you think?
It is greatly demoralizing, especially you see we are having this China standoff and everything.
Hmm.
It is a
Hmm.
very demoralizing factor here. These issues have been pending for so long, and the government
Hmm.
before the elections they have been promising many things for the armed forces, but none have been done till now. None have been implemented. No issue has been resolved till now. So it is greatly demoralizing. As and also I feel that this will even it will be a factor in demotivating the youth of the country to join the
Correct.
armed forces,
Yes, yes,
because
yes.
if the youth thinks that after joining the armed forces their own country, their own leaders won't take care of them,
Won't support.
why would anyone
Yes.
join? I
Yeah,
have
yeah,
met
yeah.
many people, being from a army background. I have
Right.
friends who are in armed forces. I have met many people who
Yes.
are in armed forces, and
Yes.
almost all of them say that they want to leave the armed forces now.
Yes,
After
yes.
5 or 10 years of service, they want to leave because they feel that
Hmm.
their career aspirations are not being met with.
Hmm.
If you join a government service, you aspire to,
Yes.
go rise in the ranks. So if this
Very correct.
in
And no
the
amount or you, it's yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually speaking, you are right, and it's demoralizing the youth of India also. Correct. Very correct.
and I think in the civil parlance, the
Hmm.
seniority comes with the pay grade.
Hmm.
Okay, so if now NFU is for financially upgrading you, that is putting you onto the next pay grade.
Hmm.
So if it is not being given to the armed forces but to the civil bureaucracy or to the civil services, any
Hmm.
youth
Yeah.
who wants to go into government services, they will be more motivated to join civil services than the armed forces.
Then yes. Because they have, themselves have discriminated. And there's no amount of advertisements, no amount of such marketing which has been going on to join army, join navy, join your defense forces won't will help actually, I suppose. There's a question which is related to NFU again. They say that is it a fact that NFU was offered to the armed forces and some senior officers showed reluctance, saying that it will breed mediocrity in the organization. I mean, that kind of thing is it true or it's a rumor? I don't know if
Ma'am,
you can
I am
say.
aware that this was for the doctors. They said that this issue was brought up specifically in case of doctors. That I am aware of. It was
Okay.
there, and the reason for which this thing was said is not known to me, because as per me, NFU will be a motivating factor for anyone to continue in the services. If
Hmm.
someone is stagnated at a lower rank, at
Yeah.
let's say a rank of lieutenant colonel or major,
Hmm.
they are not able
Hmm.
to go up.
Yeah.
So, this financial upgradation is a motivation for them to keep serving the country.
Correct.
And
And also, there is a
uh,
long process which is involved into this. And I think there are stages, there are internal examinations, which are also very tough. And it's not always necessary that everybody will get that kind of upgradation, promotions, and
exactly,
everything. So why
exactly,
it
because of
can't be
the
simply
steep.
to? Yeah.
Sorry, please continue.
No, no, no. I was just asking you about it. That there's this long procedure, even if it's about promotions, internal promotions in the armed forces
That's
also. So it's very tough, and everybody cannot get through it so easily, smoothly, like it happens on timely things. So, what's your take on that also? Because that's also a major aspect.
that's exactly the issue, ma'am. That's exactly why the armed forces deserve to get NFU the most, because these exams, even if everybody passes the exam, due to the lack of vacancies, not everyone can rise higher in the ranks. So there
Hmm.
is much more stagnation in the armed forces. That's exactly the reason why armed forces should be getting NFU.
Very correct, and I think this issue needs more voices to come forward, and this should be taken up. That's what I've been saying since we started off the discussion. That this should be raised a lot now. And there's one more question: what is the road ahead that you see from here? Can we think of any timeline? Like, is there any timeline which has been given? SC seems to have time for petty matters like which are going on now, and they can pen matters like NFU forever. You think so?
Ma'am, definitely the NFU should be coming, and only the court can decide that whether it should be granted to the armed forces or not. And as far as timeline is concerned, uh, there can be no timeline. This is a legal procedure. As of now, due to the worldwide COVID pandemic, the Supreme Court is only considering the important cases or the priority cases. And NFU being a service matter, it's not a priority case. So we cannot give any timeline, but we are hopeful that the court will decide in the towards the right decision. They'll give the right decision.
But there's no timeline which we can think about, or we can be hopeful about, or people can really, think that this should
Ma'am,
happen and this will happen soon.
we cannot be giving any timeline. This is a legal process. There is no timeline. But as of now, as of today, what is being reflected on the website is that the NFU matter is listed to be heard on 12th of October. So
Okay.
we are hopeful that something will happen on that date. Some favorable thing will happen. So let's be hopeful for that. But as of now, we cannot give any timeline.
Okay. And what kind of push is required to get this thing done sooner or later? What is required? Is it required that the voice should come within the armed forces who are there? I mean, where the voice should come, that it should get that push for the justice to come soon?
Ma'am, the push has to come from the political leadership. They are the only ones who
Memos and
can,
yeah.
yeah, they are the ones who, they should have that urge to do justice for the armed forces. They are the only ones who can make this happen. So the push has to come from there. If the bureaucracy, which we feel that the bureaucracy is stagnating this whole process, it's the bureaucracy is delaying this whole case, it's only the political leadership who can correct this and who can give the dues of armed forces. So the push has to come from there.
Right. And can CDS or Chief of Army Staff or any of the chiefs can do something about it? Legally, if I had to
Ma'am,
talk about it on that
that
front.
I cannot comment on because it's up to them. That I don't
They
know what
that
they think.
support they need to decide amongst themselves. I think that they should be taking it up with the
Yes,
Minister of Ministry of Defense. So that
yes,
is
because they have a
that
direct
is their
line of
call, I think.
communication with them.
Yes, yes. So that's their call, I think, and they must take it up with amongst themselves, because
They
this is
should.
something not just about you know Indian armed forces, but it is also about some morals which are there in the system, and it affects
Definitely,
majorly. So
definitely.
being yes, yes, yes. So Nehal, thank you for joining me, and we'll take some more questions if they are there, and then we'll take your final this thing also about the youth of India and how you are going to go about this entire thing. So if there are
Sure,
any
ma'am.
questions, I'll just take them now. Just a second. So that's it. I think we have taken all the questions also over here.
Okay.
What is the interest of the Indian state, of any fair state, or of any government to degrade its armed forces systematically? There was one question on this also. Yeah, I'll just read it
Ma'am,
out once again.
yeah,
Yeah, what is the
yeah.
interest of the Indian state, of any fair state, or of any government to degrade its armed forces systematically? Don't you think that there is this systematically done degradation? What do you think? Is it not been done deliberately? Something on these lines?
Ma'am, as I said, we
Yeah.
feel that it's the bureaucracy doing
Hmm.
this and it's not the political leadership. Political leadership also, if I may, I think this is my personal opinion. Political
Yes.
leadership always wants supremacy. They want to remain above everyone else. I think that might be what is hindering, or that might be what is responsible for the systemic degradation.
Hmm.
Maybe they feel threatened by the armed forces, which I don't know why it happens, because obviously the armed forces are there to serve the country. So, what
Yes.
is the reason for being, for feeling threatened by the armed forces is not known. That reason is not known. But I don't know. I think it is the bureaucracy mainly
Yeah.
which is hindering this, and the political leadership can help it. And obviously, like, we are not Pakistan or any dictatorship country or something like that, that the armed forces will overthrow the government or like that. No, Indian armed forces
Hmm.
are professional. They are there to serve the country. They are there
Right.
to protect the country, to do their duty. So what is the reason for them to feel threatened? That is something which needs explanation. Why they don't speak up on these issues? Why are they systematically degrading the armed forces, which can be devastating for a country? Because armed forces are responsible for the protection. If you systematically degrade them, so that
Hmm.
is devastating. So yeah, that is what my view is on this.
No, very correct, and I really agree with you on this point. And thank you, Nehal, and we really wish you all the best. And thank you so much for raising your voice, being the youth voice of India. It's like something coming from the youth of India, and coming you come from armed forces background, and then addressing this issue. That is something which is really, really I admire your spirit, and we wish you, and I thank you to Colonel Mukul Dev also, and I wish you and him all the best for all the fights which are there. We are there to support and give the platform to all the real voices, and all for all the real issues which are there. So thank you, Mukul. Your message to all the youth who are watching you and who will be watching this show.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us a platform to raise this issue. And the message would be that we need to stand by our armed forces. As of now, we are looking at a clash with the People's Liberation
China.
Army of China, and
Yeah,
we need to support our armed forces.
definitely.
We are surrounded by enemy on two fronts. On one front, the western front is Pakistan, and the other front is from China. We need to, stand fast by our armed forces. We need to ensure that that our armed forces get all their dues, all these issues are sorted out, and they do their service happily. they are protecting the nation. So yeah, we
Yes.
should ensure justice to them.
Definitely, and we shall raise our voices to the higher ups, and we shall get justice, and this will happen sooner or later. It will happen. It will happen.
I'm
So we
hopeful.
have that much faith in the government. We have that much faith in the citizens of India, and also in the honorable Supreme Court that it will happen. So thank you so much. Have a great week ahead. And thank you once again for joining me and addressing the issues. We'll come with
Thank you.
Nehal on more such issues which are related to the benefit of armed forces and also on many other topics in the coming episodes. Thank you, Nehal. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, ma'am.